Hello and welcome to Clamp, the weekly podcast where we discuss all things related to creating, living, and making projects. I'm your host, Grant Alexander, and joining me as always is Adam Mackey and Jessy Ratfink. This week, I saw a video by one of our patrons, Mark Daner, and he was talking about the old saying, buy once, cry once. And the title or the thumbnail that was up when I saw it was buy once, cry once is bullshit. And I thought that would be a really good start to a conversation about, that saying, is buying once, crying once the right thing to do? Or should you buy multiple times and cry multiple times? And I'll pass it off to you guys.
Well, I think, first of all, I want to say I think it depends on what it is. Like, I spent a lot of money on my CNC because I bought a good quality CNC that I know has a lot of good feedback and all that sort of stuff, whereas I could have bought one for probably half the cost that I probably have a lot of issues with. But when you talk about, say, like a handheld sort of tools and stuff, I actually prefer to buy not cheapo tools, but cheaper tools. Like, I would rather, if you could buy, say, a Fez tool for $1,200, a Fez tool router for $1,200, and it lasts you 6 years, I would rather buy a new $200 router every year for 6 years because I like the feeling of buying new tools.
So
yes, I have to cry once a year, but I also get that in, what's that word? Like the euphoria of like getting a new tool and it's all clean and shiny. And
I also tend to go for cheaper, but it's more just because I've never really had a lot of money to drop on tools until recently. So yeah, I always seem to go not the cheapest, like maybe one step up for everything. And now I'm kind of in the process of thinking about buying tools that will last for multiple years instead of like the $30 Black & Decker drill that you kill within a couple years. So yeah, I don't know. I just sort of always was in the mindset of, I need this to get the job done. If it gets that job done, we're fine. Because that's normally when I buy a tool. Like when something bad happens at the house or like we have to make a repair, that's always when I'm buying tools. So yeah, I just needed to get this done.
I also, like, I don't know if I see the quality in the more expensive tools. Like I have a $120 Ryobi orbital sander. And then I have a $40 or $50 like Bunnings brand orbital sander. And it is so much better. The cheap one is so much better than the Ryobi.
You're comparing.
And I know you're going to say it's Ryobi. Yes, I know.
No. But you're not comparing quality and quality. You're comparing rotten apples and other rotten apples and saying, yeah, they're both rotten. Yes. But this one's slightly better.
I know. I'm not comparing like the cheaper orbital to a Merkur or something, but I'm just saying that that's 3 times the price and it's not 3 times better. It's actually, I think that the cheaper one's better. It probably won't last as long, but it's better.
Yeah, but I think when you're dealing with the lowest end, it's the difference between the two is small.
Well, I've got that DeWalt drill and it is 10 times better. It's still 10 times better than the Ryobi drill.
Yeah, but imagine if you had a Festool. Like, I think the big problem is a lot of people who talk about buy once, cry once are talking about it from a different perspective than most people watching that YouTube video, watching that recommendation, listening to that podcast, whatever it is. A lot of the people who say buy once, cry once are doing it from a perspective of this is going to make me money. It's also going to be a write-off. Like the tax liabilities are going to be lowered. There's a lot of things that if you were a business making money, buy once, cry once makes a lot more sense.
Yes.
Right? Especially once you start factoring in, like I was listening to Work For It, and Brian House was talking about buying a big expensive CNC machine. I think a Haas, and I think it's like $80,000, and like once it's actually in his head, like right. I think once it's actually in it, like installed, he's like $100,000 in, and he was looking at buying a used one, and he was like, the used ones, a 20-year-old used one was not that much cheaper, right? It wasn't like a steal of a deal. So he went, if I buy a brand new one, it comes with the, warranty, comes with the people like helping. There's like a, I don't know, helpline isn't the right way, but like it comes with like a helpline and they help you set it up, and they have like a, an attendant who can answer your questions, as opposed when you buy something used. The only thing that's nice about buying a used thing is it comes with a lot of tooling that you might want.
Yeah.
That also might be garbage. You have no clue, right? But I think so, and he's doing it from a business perspective, and it makes sense to make that investment in his business. And I think it's a lot different when it's like my hobby. Do I need the best tools for my hobby? Or, like Mark Danner said in his video, do I need to just get started?
Yeah, and I think that's where people sort of get lost. Like, I think the buy once, I think it should be like buy twice, cry twice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
At
you
least,
shouldn't, you shouldn't just, yeah, like you shouldn't just like go into like a brand new hobby and buy the best of the best. Because you also, you need that to work with the cheap stuff to know what you, like what, you know what I mean? Like if you go straight to the good stuff, you don't know what the bad stuff, you don't appreciate it as much because you don't know like what the bad stuff is like.
right. I 100% agree with you with one caveat. Sometimes the bad stuff is so bad, it puts you off the hobby.
My table saw. My
Right.
table saw saga. I've been through two $200 table saws, and now I hate table saws. But I bet if I had a good table saw, I
Right.
wouldn't feel that way. I think the table saws are the worst tool there is. They're shit. But it's only because I've had cheap ones.
So I guess I also sort of do that. Like I'll buy kind of the entry level to see if I'm going to use it, if I enjoy it, what features are most important, what I could do without. I do that a lot. I think in multiple places in my life, like my exercise room is a lot like my workshop, where it's sort of, it's not the best, but I've just been sort of trying it out and seeing if I liked it for this whole time. And like this year, I think I'm going to upgrade to like a fancy ass rowing machine instead of the like
Right.
$300 one I have right now, just because I've used it and I enjoy it and I know what doesn't work and what works now.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I used to work in a hobby shop. I worked there all throughout high school, so like 5 years. And I remember a lot of people would come in and buy like the cheapest models, the cheap paint, and they'd buy like, we had like these brushes. I don't even know why we sold them. They were like, I think they were like only good for glue, but people would buy them and try and paint with, right? They're like plastic, and like as soon as you touch them to like Varsol, they would just disintegrate. But and then they'd buy like I don't know if you ever saw, like there was a carousel of enamel paints that you could buy at a hobby shop. They had like all the fun, and I remember wanting that as a kid too. Like all the colors are there, I can do anything, right? But they were not good paints, and they would buy cheap brushes, and they'd combine it all together and hate the hobby. And it would be like I would always tell them like I did the same thing as you. I did this already. I cried already. Buy buy at least one good brush so you know the difference. So you see what the cheap is and you see what the good is. And that makes sense for something that's like the brushes were 25 cents and like $5. That's a
Yeah.
big difference in price. But I'm like, buy one $5 brush. You don't have to buy the whole set. Buy one and you will see how much nicer. And I got like 20 of those $5 brushes. I still use them to this day.
You ever painted a wall in a house with a cheap brush versus an expensive brush?
Yes.
It is light and day.
Yeah. One time I invited my buddy over to have like a little, paint party at my house. And I was like, I got the
Kinky.
brushes and everything, whatever. Come over, we'll have, pizza and beer and whatever, and we'll paint a couple rooms in my house. And he's like, okay, I'll come over. And on the way, he stopped at the dollar store and bought some paintbrushes and paint buckets and all that stuff. And he was like, I got my supplies. I was like, if you want to use them, that's fine. And he bought like they had like dollar store edgers that had like rollers so you could get right up on the edge. And I just remember like, this is taking longer. It's not getting as good a result. It's just horrible. but he was convinced his dollar store items were the way to go. And so there are times when buy once, cry once makes sense. But if you are going to paint with oil paint, buy a cheap brush, because at the end you just throw the thing in the garbage. That's what
Yeah.
I do. Because I have tried cleaning brushes, and the amount of paint thinner that it takes to actually clean a brush to the standards that I like is insane.
They are really hard. Oh, I hate it.
Yeah.
I also feel like buy once, cry once doesn't necessarily have to be cry once. So I say I don't like table saws. I've bought the cheapest table saw that you can literally in Australia buy, and I say I hate table saws because they're shit. I'm not comparing it to a cheap one that I can get off Facebook Marketplace like what Grant has that would be a hell of a lot better. Just, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to go out and buy like a brand new saw stop. A proper table saw off Facebook Marketplace is going to be good.
Yeah. So one of the other okay, let's you get into something with some cheaper tools. Like my leatherworking tools and Ethan Carter, when he teaches his classes, like he talks about this is the leatherworking tools that you can buy and how he started. And once he realized leather is the place he liked, because he started building guitars, ukuleles, that kind of thing. And he realized that wasn't where his passion was. Leather was where his passion. So he bought these like stitching chisels that are very expensive, and it makes sense, right? But he needed to buy cheap ones first. And I think right now we are at a spot in the world, or in the maker life, where you can get away with a lot of the cheaper tools that you didn't used to be able to get away with. And they're good enough for most things. And they're great for testing, as long as they're not so cheap. Like I've seen plastic stitching chisels.
No.
And I just go like, and I saw them and I went, the metal ones are $10, so the plastic ones are $5. Why would you ever buy that? But they sell them.
It's like using plastic cutlery on a steak.
Yes.
Right, no, thank you. I'll just use my hands.
Oh
No,
my God.
it's possible, but it is frustrating as hell.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
Or
that's painful to
it's like
think
getting
about.
a paper straw in your drink.
Oh my God, yeah,
No
the
thanks.
paper straws. They got to come
Fuck
up with
off.
something better, but that is not where we're going here. So all that to say is, so maybe I think the big thing is like if you want to buy something to test something out, do your research. Figure out what are you going to use this for? Does it make sense to go big, or does it make sense to start small? And if you're going to start small, are you going to start at the very bottom? Are you going to start used? Like you can get a lot of like I often just go on Kijiji, which is the Canadian Craigslist, which is the Australian, I don't know. Um,
Gumtree.
I don't know what in Australia you guys use, but
Gumtree.
Gumtree, right. So I often go in there and just search tools, or on Facebook Marketplace, and I just search through all the tools that are available. And I just look at how cheap some of the tools that I own are going for. Like you want a drill driver set. Well, first of all, you should buy a brand new one because the batteries are going to be really good. And they go on sale so cheap all the time. But you can get them for like $30-$40, right? Because they go on sale all the time, and
Because they're stolen.
a couple years later, they're not as good as the brand new ones.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, like I said before, like I think it depends on the tool. Like I don't see a point in spending $100 on a Stanley knife when I can, like a cheap knife from a $2 shop works just as well. To be honest.
Well, I don't. So this is something that gets hard, and I think it's diminishing returns. You don't use your Stanley knife or whatever knife every day, right? You don't use your utility blade every day, so you don't realize the inefficiencies or the like the ways that it could be better because you're not using it enough.
Yeah,
But if
that's
you
a great
used
point.
it every day, $100 one might make sense,
Yeah.
right? So I've got one that has like it's got knives, like extra blade storage built into it, but it's one of the old school, like you have to use a thumb screw to like unscrew
Oh
it,
yeah.
which is it's got actually like a little like thing so you can get like it like pulls out, so you don't actually have to bring a screwdriver out. You can unscrew it by hand, but you still have to unscrew it, so it still takes time switching the blades. But when I compare that to my one that has a quick release blade,
Yeah,
the
that's what my
knife
Stanley's
is
got.
way nicer to use the solid one that screws together. But there's with everything. There's a pro and a con. Are you switching blades out constantly because you're doing drywall? Well, you probably want one with a quick release blade, right? Are you doing something where you're changing the knife every once in a while? Well, then you want one that has a nice solid feel to it and good ergonomics. So, like when you're talking about buy once, cry once, that's hard. So, on the race team, we have utility knives. We have like 4 of them. They're all different. There's like a couple of Husky ones, a couple of Mastercraft ones, and when I open this drawer, I always grab the exact same one every single time. We got 4 of them. The only time I'll ever grab not the one I like, because I like one that like I can flick open with one hand, and all the rest you can't do that. The only time I'll grab one of the other ones is when that one's missing.
So, what do we think about, like, I think this is something that I also spent a lot of time thinking about when, like, starting a new hobby is what can I repurpose so that I can spend extra money on the more important bits? So, like, especially with photography, I did a bunch of really sketchy stuff to get really good shots with, like, not, I really didn't have any, like, accessories for my camera beyond, like, a bounce flash. And I was just sort of making stuff up with like white poster board and different fabrics and whatever else. So I think there's also something to be said for really like doing your research and thinking about what do I really need at the minimum to get started
Right.
doing this. Because I think some people tend to go a little overboard. Like they like buy everything, every accessory you could have for a hobby. And then maybe 2 months down the road, they aren't using it anymore.
Well, that's a good point too, is that you don't know what you need. You'd be like, oh, I need this, like, say photography, for instance. You're going to say you want to make like ads for Instagram or whatever. Oh, I'm going to buy this like Lazy Susan that I can control with my phone and it rotates and get the pictures that I need and stuff. And then you just never use it. Whereas if you started off with something cheap, you'd be like, okay, well, I'd use this all the time. I'd like to upgrade it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I 100% agree that a lot of people go overboard. And when I worked at the hobby shop, we loved those customers. Customers who would come in and just be like, I want the best. I don't want to start out the little. I want to go 100%. Like, I'm buying everything that's the best. And oftentimes, like, you would see like, when I raced remote control cars, you would see that, like, the old, the people who'd been doing it for a long time would look at this person come in with all the best thousands of dollars worth of equipment, and they wouldn't be very good. And buying the equipment doesn't make you good. Doing the things makes you good, and actually starting out with with shitty stuff potentially makes you better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Makes you more creative,
Yeah.
makes you understand what you can and cannot do, right? Like, makes you really appreciate when you get the good photography setup, when you get the good, you know, the things like you can problem solve a way to do something without the fancy tool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to produce a product, getting the fancy tool makes sense. Right? If you want to
Yeah.
spit it out, you want to have efficiencies. You don't want to be sitting there fiddling with something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I have a mill, like a metalworking mill, and I've been thinking about buying a lathe. And like, I think I could do a lot of what I want to do with a lathe on my mill. It just is a lot more work setting it up. And that efficiency only matters if I actually value my time, and I don't.
So you're thinking about buying a lathe, but you don't use the lathe that you already have.
So it's a metalworking lathe?
No,
Is that a different thing?
you have a lathe.
I
You
have
have
a
a
woodworking
woodworking
lathe.
lathe.
Yeah, I use that.
Yes. So why do you want to buy another lathe?
I want to buy a metalworking lathe.
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood.
Yes.
I'm literally just sitting here like, what the hell? You have a lathe? Why? Anyway.
So I do think about buying a standalone woodworking lathe because my woodworking lathe only does a certain size. And of course, the first project I think of doing is like the size it does plus 2 inches. And I go, fuck. Right? And I go, but it does like almost a baseball bat. Right? That's a pretty good chunk of, right? And for some reason, I can't think of any projects that are between. Like, I don't know. Like, I can only go, I need a bigger one. But that's like everything has like this, like humans have a problem with continuously needing 2 feet more, 2 inches more, whatever the number is, depending on what, like in campers, yeah, okay, Adam. Jesus Christ. In campers, they talk about it in feet because if you get a 15-foot camper, then you look at a 17-foot, then you look at a 19-foot, and Jessy is just going wild. She's like, you know what? I can't breathe. Yeah.
It was when Adam started giggling. I couldn't handle it.
I'm sorry.
So, Jessy and Adam are little kids.
Yes, we are in middle school. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very accomplished middle schoolers.
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm sure there's a lot of listeners going, did he just say what I think he said?
Right. Well, everyone has the problem. They just want a little bit more. I wish I was a little bit taller. That's all.
I wish I was a baller.
Yeah. Anyways, you can always look at everything and go, I wish it was a little bit bigger, right? But you got to work with what you got. Because you know what? It's not about the size of the boat. It's about the motion of the ocean.
Just lean into it.
All right. That's what I'm doing. You guys got any more on the motion in the ocean?
No, not the motion in the ocean.
Okay, go.
I have another bullet point. So
go for it.
I want to let's move into talking about consumables, because there is definitely a buy once cry once when it comes. Well, you buy multiple times, but there's definitely like you could go. I can go to Bunnings. I can get 4 liters of PVA glue for $20, or I can go buy 4 liter or 3.85 liters, whatever a gallon is, of Type Bond for $80.
Yeah. I've only ever used Type Bond, so I have no clue if the other glue is any good.
So in our school, when we do woodworking at school, it's the cheap $20 PVA glue. Never had an issue with it the whole time I ever made stuff at school. And then when I started doing this as a hobby, I was always doubting the glue. I think that the Type Bond is a lot nicer to work with, but I don't know if it's actually better. And the only reason why I have Type Bond is because I did a job for someone and I charged them for a full bottle, even though I didn't need a full bottle.
So I got Type Bond 1 and Type Bond 3. And I like Type Bond 3 to work with 90% of the time because it's a little bit runnier, not as sticky. But the Type Bond 3 like sets up a little faster and dries clearer. The Type Bond 3 kind of has this like dark look to it when it dries. That's all I know about glue. I will say that I have bought like cheap super glue. I bought cheap, anytime I go and try and buy consumables, I try and buy the cheaper stuff. And the problem with it is twofold. One, often the container fucking sucks. It just blows. And you just go like, oh, okay, so I've opened this glue and now it's garbage. Right? It can
Yep.
never be resealed again because of the poorly designed container. And then the second thing is it doesn't do exactly what you want it to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like those 10 packs of super glue you get from the dollar store, you literally use a couple of drops and then you throw the container out. There's no storing it for next time. Like,
Yeah.
but I buy, like, so if I buy 2-part epoxy, you buy, like, it's got, like, when you push it, it comes out the 2
Yeah.
things. I always buy the cheap one from Bunnings because I've never used the more expensive one that I could pay like 10 times the amount for. But the one that I buy works fine. In saying
For
that,
your use.
for my use. In saying that, I went to the dollar store yesterday and got some, and it was shit.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
But then,
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, go Jesse.
Well, I was just going to say, I think for me, a consumable, it matters how often do I use this? Like, is this a really important, really important part of my process? Or is it just something that it doesn't really matter how it's done, it just needs to get done? Like, I have brand loyalty to so many random embroidery things. Like, I will only buy the Wright's blue embroidery pen that is water soluble. That's the only one that always works. I will only buy the Aleene's Fabric Tack glue because it's the only good one as far as I'm concerned. Like, I either have really intense brand loyalty or I just don't care at all when it comes to consumables.
I feel like with that, though, that there's some sort of specialty use to what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're talking about like a fabric glue, not just a standalone glue.
Yeah.
So like there would be differences in like the different chemistries and all that sort of stuff. But like if you go, say, I could go when I used to do the paracord stuff, right? I could go buy Atwood rope, which is like extremely expensive, or I can buy the cheap stuff off eBay, which does the exact same job for a lot cheaper.
Well, if you're not jumping out of a parachute, yes, it does.
Yes.
Right? Like, this is the thing is you got to evaluate, is it like integral to like
Yeah.
if you're jumping out of an airplane, you're not buying eBay paracord, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
Right.
But on that, when you go a bit more specialty, say like 3D printer filament
Right.
off eBay can be very shit compared to
Right.
the quality stuff that you can buy.
I've bought one no-name Chinese or not like Asian brand. I don't want to single out a particular country. One no-name brand, and it was garbage. And I wish I'd read the reviews because not only was it not what I thought it was, I thought it was wood filament, which like was stainable wood filament, and it wasn't. It was wood-colored filament. If I'd read the reviews, I would have known. But it wasn't even like. It was regular price, but that's cheap for wood filament. And then on top of that, half the people complained about it being like kind of wet. And so it didn't like adhere well together. And that's exactly what happened with me. But I didn't read any of the reviews. I just got excited it was free 1 day shipping or whatever. And I definitely, I feel you. I think you need to do research in that. Is it structural? Is it the thing that makes the difference? Because if it is, then it matters. Like if your PVA glue holds up, you're good to go. If you're making something like a cutting board, you want better glue, right?
Yeah.
Because it matters.
Well, and also, I guess related to that, when you're making stuff to sell, I think that adds another layer of complexity to it because a lot of times you don't know how those materials actually age and function over time. Like, for example, I made a lot of jewelry when I first started my Etsy store. I made golden snitch necklaces, and I bought so much stuff that would swear it was sterling silver. It would swear it wouldn't tarnish. All of these things, I would sink so much money into stuff and then, let it sit out just room temperature humidity in the Bay Area for a couple weeks, and a lot of it would start like tarnishing or even rusting sometimes. And for stuff
Wow.
like glues, it's even harder to know because your customer's environment could be totally different. There could be a lot of environmental issues that you just don't really understand at the time because it works fine where you are and for short term.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and on top of that, you're the person who made it. So you're a lot more accepting often of like, well, I'll just fix it up. I made it. I know how to remake it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think once you start selling, you need to really start buying once and crying once.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things and that led us into this whole topic was that Adam wanted to talk about the how making has become a lot cheaper now, and he talked about like 3D printers and CNCs used to be like $10,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought an interesting take on that is this buy once, cry once. You might buy something today that's $10,000, this new emerging technology, and you're like, wowee, 5-axis CNC or something, and you're like, wow, I bought this. And 2 years from now, they're so cheap that you're crying
Yeah.
again,
That's a great point.
right?
Like, it's
Like,
yeah.
I could not imagine paying $5,000 for a 3D printer, and today being like it's equivalent to a $300 printer. Like, oh,
So
I'd be crying
old,
again,
old mate
right?
old mate has a printer farm in his garage that costs less than your one printer.
Right. So this is where I think you gotta like being the first on a new technology is a really exciting thing, and you have to be prepared that that technology is going to go nowhere and do nothing or go super cheap.
What it's like the people that have to buy like the brand new iPhone the day it comes out.
Right.
Like, and then you could literally buy one on Facebook Marketplace a week later for half the price.
Yeah.
Maybe not half, but you know what I mean. Like, it's just like you just have to have like what's new and in hip and what.
But
But I don't know.
those people don't care. They're not. Those people have too much
No,
money.
no.
That's why they're doing it. But if you're thinking about buying once, crying once, and you're thinking like I'm investing into my whatever it is, you really got to think about it and go, is this actually the investment I think it is? Or is
Yeah.
this some new emerging technology that's going to go down in price? Right? Or is it even if it goes down in price, does that matter? Because it will pay for itself, right? It's like all these things that you got to take into consideration. And I think a lot of people don't do it properly if they're a business, right? If it's a hobby, like none of this matters.
Yeah, and I think just working in tech for so long and seeing so many of these hot new game-changing tools and materials just sort of poof disappear. I am very skeptic. And so, like, a lot of times I will not jump on a trend until it has been a trend for a very long time. 3D printing just started it last year. I've been talking about it and working around it for a decade, but I just bought my first 3D printer and started last year. Like, I take a really long time to get on any sort of train.
Same girl, same. I on what Grant was saying, it's actually really interesting to think that people like these things come out like a 3D printer and they're like, okay, I'm going to buy this 3D printer that costs $5,000 like back in the day and start a business out of it, right? And now everyone's got one. Or like people that bought plotters back in the day to make stickers and stuff, and now everyone has a Cricut cutter or equivalent. You know what I mean? So like, is that business actually as sustainable as you think it could be? Yeah, you might do well for 5 years, but then 5 years down the track, everyone has their own version of it that your business is pretty much gone. And I think we're getting to that age where that's going to happen a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been happening. And I think your equipment shouldn't be the thing that sets you apart. If that's the thing that sets you apart as a business, then I think you're destined to fail. The thing that should set you apart is you, right? And your ideas and your creativity and your marketing and your community and your connections, and there's so many other things that you can rely on. But if the thing that you're relying on is a piece of equipment that you purchased, you are unlikely to be in business in 5 years because you have
Yeah.
purchased that. Everyone else could purchase that too, right? The
Mm.
barrier to entry is low if you can purchase it, and it's only ever. Oftentimes, things get cheaper and cheaper. It's not always true, but generally speaking, things get cheaper and cheaper. It's how you use that equipment and how you market it and how you connect with other people,
Yeah.
right? So
100%.
the people I know that have big plotters that are big giant vinyl cutters, the way they make their money has nothing to do with whether or not they have the equipment. It's the connections they've made and the like. I know a guy. He wraps or he does the decals on our cars, and the why he is the person who does so much work and gets so much money for what he does is because when somebody calls him at midnight and says, "I need this tomorrow by 8 a.m." He's there with it by 8 a.m. the next day. He's run his printer all night long so that he can do it. And that's what sets him apart.
Yeah, because I sort of wanted to talk about the inverse side of that, which is something I've seen happen in both the embroidery and the 3D printing worlds, where things become more acceptable, not acceptable. I'm my brain today, more accessible,
Yeah.
cheaper, and there's just general interest in it. So, I mean, think about how many shops there are on Etsy right now selling 3D printed crap that they downloaded off Thingiverse. They didn't even make
Yeah.
anything. And sometimes they're even like stealing designs from other designers. Like
Hmm.
Nicole, Penelope Bulnick on Instructables just found out that someone has basically stolen her designs and is selling them in their Etsy store. So there's also
Yeah.
just this huge amount of competition to get that money from consumers once the market becomes so overflooded. Like
Mm-hmm.
with embroidery, sure, I could charge, $80 for a 6-inch hoop, but who would want to pay that when there are 100 other people willing and begging to do that for like $15-$20?
Right.
So I don't know. There's also kind of a weird dark side of when things get, so easy to run, so easy to use. Everybody thinks they're going to make a profit doing it. And I get really frustrated seeing that just because it's such a small percentage of people that are able to actually do it full time.
And I think a lot of that has to do with someone who actually enjoys it as a hobby wants it to break even,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right? And so they're and that is you got to compete with those people because that's just the way it is. And if you're doing
Yeah.
something that is able to do on a weekend, you're going to be competing with those people. Like you see with all the little like you see people selling cutting boards, and even then, like you can buy a cutting board at Walmart for like $15. So why would you even
Mm-hmm.
pay 200? We were paying 200 because it's a lot nicer, but there's 1,000 different reasons. But when you look at hobbies, you see people selling cutting boards that are the same from $80 to $300. And you look at that and you go, well, why is anyone buying the $300 one and not the $80 one? And why is that person charging 80? 80 doesn't barely cover the materials. And I get it. It's because it's a hobby and they're having fun doing it. And they're learning and they're doing like, they're just, yeah, they're just doing it, right? And they're just having
Mm.
fun. And the barrier to entry is so low and they're doing it on the
Mm-hmm.
weekend and they're just trying to recoup costs instead of actually making it a business. And if you want to make a business, you got to got to figure out what's the thing that sets you apart.
Yeah. That's definitely more
And it's
important
like,
now than ever.
well, and that's where if you look at your designs are what set you apart. That's why it made sense to sell your designs instead of
Yeah.
selling the actual thing. Well, on that note, is there anything else on buy once, cry once? Or would you all like to cry multiple times?
I don't think I have anything else.
Yeah, me either.
Well, I would like to not cry and instead thank our patrons for supporting us, especially the F Clamp level, Brent Jarvis from Clean Cut Woodworking, Vincent Ferrari from Digitally Creative, Scott from Dad It Yourself DIY, Joe Herdina, Lawrence from Maritime Knife Supply, Rich from Low End Design, and David Wood from DW Wood Builds. Thank you to all of them and everyone else who supports us. If you're interested in supporting us, you get access to the pre-show and after show where we talk about lots of fun and exciting things and sometimes secret stuff. And you also get a leather keychain that is numbered based on the number when you sign up on Patreon. And I send them out in the mail to you direct from my workshop. And I've already made number 35, so someone please sign up so I can send it out. On that note, thank you very much, CLAMPmendations.
CLAMPmendations!
I'd like to everyone should go and play the game The Last of Us. It is a really good game, and I think we talked about it last time. I can't remember if we talked about it in the after show or not, but I after talking about it, I decided to fire it up and start playing it again, and I realized the last time I played it was 2015, which to me feels like 2 or 3 years ago, but it's not. It's apparently 8 years ago. And now the show is out, and I realize Nick Offerman is in it, and I'm really excited to watch the show because I really like Nick Offerman, and I think he is a really good actor and also obviously a maker and all that fun stuff. And I'm excited to watch the show. And on top of that, I'm excited to play through the game again. So
I will go now. My clampmendation for this week is also a game. I would like to recommend Stray. It came out, I think, last year. I played through it in about 3-4 days. But you're basically a cat in a dystopian future city. You get separated from your little family and you have to reconnect with them. And it was incredibly immersive. And the soundtrack is amazing. The environments are really fun and cyberpunkish. And the animations for the cat are so cute. If you are a cat person, you'll probably squeal multiple times playing the game. Like, I love that you can scratch things and you can drink from water puddles and you can like click keys on a keyboard. You can knock stuff off the top of things. Like, it was very fun to be a cat for a few days.
Yeah. I remember when that came out, it was like all over the internet, and I thought about downloading it and then didn't because I'm a dog person. So
I think you're going to say because I'm an adult. Well, no. So I'm going to be honest. I was meant to go first for clampmendations and moved my name because I didn't have one. I still don't have one. This is a thing, right? No, let me explain. This is a thing. When I want to get into a certain like mindset and world, I surround myself with those things. So I have been watching a lot of like Eddie Hall and Shaw Strength and like bodybuilders and stuff because I'm trying to get myself so interested that I just want to get to the gym every day. So I think like my clampmendation is pretty much like do that. Surround yourself around stuff that you want to do because I don't like there isn't one person that I want to really share, but like, yeah.
Cool. Well, this week we've got an Ask Jessy Anything. This is from David Wood from DW Wood Builds. And his question is, what failure or disappointment later became your biggest learning experience and allowed you to be successful?
So I had to like talk out loud to my partner about this because I was just trying to think, what was it? And I decided to settle on learning that I am absolutely terrible at sales. I failed at Books A Million. I failed at EB Games. I failed at GameStop. I got a job at JCPenney to sell jewelry and watches and never showed up to it because I didn't want to do it. those are the only jobs where I have been told I am anything less than like satisfactory. The only jobs that I've been written up at.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I think just like realizing that is not a strength of mine. Selling people something that I truly don't think they need is not something I'm able to do. And it sort of, I think, also helped me realize that I'm much better at offering information if people want it, which sort of led me down, writing tutorials and just being generally helpful online. Because, yeah, those are definitely the most painful job experiences I've had, and it's something I never want to do. And I don't think I could be any less cut out for it.
So I worked at 7-Eleven during my time between university and college and whatever. Anyways, I worked the overnight shift and we sold cell phones. And there was like it was a big thing. Like if you could sell a cell phone, you got a $50 like bonus, which is like a big deal when I was making $8 an hour. It's like $50. That was a good bonus.
That's a day of
And
work.
yeah, and somebody came in and I thought I'm good at sales, but I won't sell something someone doesn't need to them. And they came in and they wanted to buy a cell phone, and I was talking to them, and they wanted to buy the Speak Out 7-Eleven cell phone for their 7-year-old. And I said a 7-year-old doesn't need a cell phone, and I refused to sell them the cell phone. So I went. I'm just like, first of all, who the fuck's coming in to like? I work the overnight shift, so I work from 11 to 7. I was just like, nothing was adding up. But anyways, they wanted to buy a stupid cell phone, and I refused to sell them a cell phone because I refuse to sell people stuff they don't need. Right? The 7-year-old does not need a full on real cell phone. Like there are kids like call home cell phones that you can buy from a cell phone store. You do not need a full cell phone. You don't, and you still don't today. Even though my son might have like my old Google Pixel and he's 4, but he just uses it for YouTube.
I remember having the upsell when I worked at Domino's.
Oh,
And I actually won movie tickets, but like it wasn't anything that people don't need. It was like, do you want to add a garlic bread for $2 or something? Like it wasn't. Yeah, okay, maybe they don't need the garlic bread, but then like I went and I bought some new shoes the other day, and the guy's like, all right, so he got the shoes and everything, tried them on all that, and he goes, all right, so just come with me back to the counter. And on the way back to the counter, he's like, do you need shoe cleaner and all? Like, and I'm like, shut up. I just want my shoes.
yeah.
Like, well, yeah, but you're buying like expensive Air Force Ones. Like, you should get some. No, mate, I'm good. I'm like, I just go.
So
I've got some at home. Oh no, he was very pushy.
Right, asking the question,
Yeah.
do you need shoe cleaner? And you can say no. And then if you go, but you're buying, right, and then the pushiness,
Yeah.
oh, I just want to punch pushy people in the face.
Exactly. Yeah. He goes, oh, do you need shoe cleaner? I said no. And he goes, oh, but this one here has unlimited uses compared to the ones you normally buy, which only has. And I'm like, no, I don't need it.
No. Exactly. Yeah. So, retail.
Awful.
Sucks.
So bad.
I want to thank TF Turning for the theme song. Hopefully, Tim, if you're listening, which I know you don't really listen to the podcast, but if you're listening, I want to hear the new song. So let's get on it. I'm going to message you on Discord right after this. I want to thank everyone for listening. If you want to find us on the internet, you can find us on the ClampTube, Clampstagram, and ClampBook. And I think we're off the Clamp Hitter, and I think we're looking at the Clamp Talk soon.
Working on it.
We're working on getting on TikTok, but I don't think we're going to tweet. Because Twitter's done to me. But yeah, so thanks everyone for listening. And until next time, cheers.
And have a great day.
Bye.